The Leominster City Council meeting is brought to you by the generous support of the Service Oil Company, 345R Lancaster Street, Leominster, 978-466-1922.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The public forum is an opportunity for any member of the audience to speak on any matter specifically listed on the council agenda. Speakers will be asked to come to the microphone and state their formal name and address, along with identifying the specific item or items they wish to address. Each speaker is respectfully asked to keep their comments within a 2-minute time frame. The council will not be responding or answering any questions. However, at the discretion of the council president, if clarification is necessary, I can do that. The first gentleman signed up is Travis Valley. Check that mic, see if it's on. There you go.
It's on.
All right, thank you.
How you doing, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Travis Valley, 79 Priest Street. Fourth generation in Leominster, lifelong residence. Up to 4 years I was gone in the military. I've worked for the city now for 23 years, own 3 properties in town and a business. I'm here tonight to speak about what I believe is a wrongdoing by the City Council Ways and Means Committee, hiring people for jobs in the city when we got qualified people, dedicated people in the city that are more than capable of doing the jobs, and we're looking to outside jobs. Some of the city council may not know, my wife applied for the job. She's worked for the city for 22 years. She's lived in the city for 50 years. She's a S6 over at the police department, the police chief's administrative assistant. She started as a principal clerk as an S3 back in 1996. The police department's about a $7 million budget, about 100 employees over there, and this woman goes above and beyond every day. Takes calls on the weekends. The police chief calls it, the lieutenants call it. The city does not run the police department without going through this woman. And to say she's not qualified to come over to this city hall and work in an office with 5 people is just beyond me. I don't know what is required for the city council to see we have dedicated people in the city. She was interviewed for the job. She did not make it to the second interview round, which is tonight. Police Chief Peter Roddy, 22 years police chief in this city, did not get a phone call to ask about a woman that worked for him for at least 15 years as an assistant. Chief Goldman did talk to a couple city councilors, and no other reference was called. So I don't know how the hiring situation works. I don't know what's going on in the city. But I tell you, I've been working in the city for 23 years, and a lot of city councils I see going around. I don't know what you had for experience before you came here. I don't know if you came from a city council in another community. I know Dave, I've known his whole family my whole life. He's trying to get a job at the Registry of Deeds. He's gonna be able to do the job. But does he have experience to do it now? No, he doesn't. There's someone in the job that's been doing it. Could Dave do a better job? I'm most certain he could. But for this council to go to Worcester, are these people in Worcester gonna come back and support the city council? Are they gonna support our city? When Mr. Roberge, that same picture of Jonathan's hanging in my house, that's my wife's cousin. Do these people know who Jonathan Roberge, who John Roberge is? I don't think any of them do. When Mr. Lanciani walks into the city clerk's office, that guy deserves respect in this city. Do these people know who he is? The city council needs to look right here in the city, the police department, the fire department, DPW. I hear you. You want to tell people, we're going to recertify, whatever you call it when you do that, and you say, oh, we're so lucky to have them. They're such a great employer, they're such an asset to the city. If you would have called one police chief out of the 3 that Kelly worked for, there's no doubt in my mind that she would be sitting in this office. She's the most dedicated, loyal. Confidentiality, the stuff that happens in that office, I read in the paper 3 weeks later, I say, oh, what happened here? She's like, well, I knew about that 3 weeks ago, but I can't talk about it. What are you looking for? I do not understand how someone could come from another community to this chamber, and I'd like to know, has anyone had experience with the city council before they came here? I know you can't answer me, and it's probably a good thing, because I know none of you have. I think it's ridiculous. I can't believe the audacity to not even call a reference for someone who's been for this city for 22 years. And if a counselor in this room does not know Kelly Valley at the police department, you're not involved in the community. She's at every function. When there's a donation needed, when there's a fundraiser, when they're doing a Johnny Appleseed Festival, she's at everything. Volunteering. The opiate committee right now, task force for the city of Leominster. Kelly Valley volunteers to take up that task force. Why? Because it's a problem in our community. It's not a problem somewhere else. If we don't step up for our own community, who's going to do it? I hope you get votes from Acton and Worcester, because it's pretty beat up that we didn't get them from Leominster. Have a wonderful evening.
It's 6 o'clock, that's why. We're starting at 6. I have to? Okay. The meeting has to start at 6, but we're going to recess and go right back to the public forum. So would you all please stand and join me to salute to the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll begin with the roll call vote of the honorable members of the council, beginning with Councilor Frida.
Present.
Councilor Dabrowski.
Present.
Councilor Shalfo Zephyr.
Present.
Councilor Feckley.
Present.
Councilor Bonanza.
Present.
Councilor Odenger.
Present.
Councilor Pauline Cormier.
Present.
Councilor David Cormier.
Present.
All 9 members are present. Does the chairwoman of records have a report?
I do not have a report this evening, Mr. President. I just received the minutes. I haven't had a chance to review them.
Okay, thank you. I'll take a motion from the floor for
Make a
recess.
motion for recess.
Motion by David Cormier, seconded by Pauline Cormier. All those in favor? Thank you. Okay, we're back in recess. Michael Cooley, the next person to come to the microphone, please.
Good evening, Michael Cooley, 134 Washington Street in Leominster. I just wanted to pretty much echo Travis's sentiments. I wasn't aware of even Kelly in the running until about a week or so ago. And again, I'm also pretty much shocked and surprised that we are reaching outside the city with a city of excess of 40,000 people, and you have a woman with this kind of experience, and we go outside the city for people that are not familiar with the way Leominster works. And anytime when I've always heard city councilors talk, it's always gone back in 1975, we did it this way. Back in 1986, we did it this way. Back in 1993, we did it this way. Your new city clerk can't say that. They can tell you what maybe happened in Worcester or Acton or anywhere else, but nobody knows the history of the city of Leominster. And Mrs. Valley is she's an encyclopedia for Leominster, and I think that the city of Leominster really lost out in missing a great candidate like that. That's all.
Thank you very much. Would any other member of the audience like to address the council? Come on.
John Churcher, 31 Starling Way, Leominster. I'm just here to reiterate Travis's comments. One thing that's very obvious to me, which I don't understand at all, is whoever was involved in this process, to not even give someone in the city due process and checking their references makes absolutely no sense at all. That's the least you as a committee could have done for this individual, was to hear some of these people out. I don't know what experience you have in hiring people, but to me that tells something about how this process is, and that the determination was already made ahead of time. I'm sure there's a lot we don't know about the process and the other candidates, but to me it's obvious there's one thing. If you don't have the time and the respect and the courtesy to give that person and check our references, it speaks volumes about how this hiring process took place. Thank you.
Thank you. Would any other member of the audience like to address the council?
Somebody over here. Yep, come on.
Hello, everybody. Dan DeBrule, 19 Oxford Street, Leominster, Mass. Thank you. I support Travis and his wife. I also would like to ask a question as a citizen on how charter changes are made.
It's not on the agenda tonight, sir, but I'll be glad to talk to you off the side on it.
And I'm just asking as a citizen, how do I bring change to the city of
Be
Leominster?
glad to have a conversation with you,
Okay,
okay?
okay.
You know,
And
that's a,
I know it's a
it's a
tricky
loaded
question, but is there a
No,
do I write to you as the chairman
we can
of
have
the
a
board?
discussion on it.
Okay.
It's not necessarily me directly, but we can have a conversation on
Oh,
it.
okay, I appreciate that very
Okay.
much. And one last question. I always assumed from my experience that the clerk position was an elected,
No, it's not.
no. And I assume that's back into the charter. Thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome. Would any other member of the audience like to address the council? Second call, and a third and final call. If not, the public forum is closed. We're back in session. Okay, we're gonna begin with matters before the city council. We're gonna do 3 interviews tonight. And the Ways and Means Committee has selected 3 candidates to bring before the city council. There will not be a confirmation process this evening, and it will not entertain a motion on the floor by any member of the council this evening on a specific candidate that you see. What will happen is the subcommittee will be taking place, that's Ways and Means, this coming Wednesday night at 5 o'clock in the council chambers. It's an open meeting. And what will happen if they are, potentially, they will come back to the council on the 14th with a recommendation, unless they need to go out for further interviews at that point. So I just want to make that clear. I'm also going to ask the Ways and Means Committee to formulate 6 questions tonight, 2 from each committee person. We'll start with the chair, go to the clerk, go to the third member. When they are done, I will yield the floor to the council for questions. One thing I will ask is, you know, I'm not gonna be asking any questions. There's 8 of us here. I'll leave the conversation, so I don't wanna see 16 questions on the floor. We'll be here all night. But what will happen is I'm gonna ask you to think of one solid question you'd like to ask each one of the candidates. If you would like clarification on something the candidate said, that will not count toward that question. After we go around, and every counselor has a chance to ask one question, I'll go back to the floor in case in case those counselors have another question that had not been asked or answered that evening, in all fairness to the candidates, okay? Any questions on protocol or procedure? If not, I'll yield the floor to the chairwoman of Ways and Means. Are you ready to report?
I am, Mr. President. First, I want to thank the other members of the Ways and Means Committee, Claire Frieda, who's the clerk of our committee, and John Dabrowski, who's the third member, for all of their hard work. I would like to go over a little bit of the process, just for the public. When we were informed that the city clerk was going to be retiring, we met with the city clerk and the Human Resources Director regarding job responsibilities for a city clerk, and drafted a advertisement, which was placed in some of the local papers as well as some municipal publications. We were very fortunate to receive a very large field of applicants, a very large applicant pool. We went over each application very, very carefully and diligently, and we narrowed it down to 7, which we thought were very strong candidates, who we interviewed over the course of 3 evenings last week. Out of those 7, we have found that 3 candidates rose to the top, and they will be interviewed here tonight. And I know that I speak for the Ways and Means Committee to say that we're very proud to present these candidates to you this evening. We did ask them the same questions. Everybody was asked the same questions, so I want everybody to know that. And the order of interview for this evening was determined by literally pulling the names out of the hat. And it just so happened they came out to be alphabetical and ladies first. So we will be first interviewing Caitlin Huffman. Caitlin, you come right in here.
Can we make sure the mics are working okay, please? All right.
Hi. Nice to meet you.
It's okay.
Nice to see you again. Sit wherever you feel comfortable. Make sure the microphone's on. There you go.
Hello.
Very good. Okay, Caitlin, thank you for coming this
Thank you for
evening,
having me.
and nice to see you again. So Caitlin, you know that we interviewed you, and we asked you to come back for a second interview. And I'm going to ask you a similar question to the one that I asked you this week, and then I'll ask you a follow-up question, okay?
Yes, thank you.
All right, so Caitlin, tell the council a little bit about yourself, your background, and why you applied for this position.
So my background is in the town of Acton. I've had 6 years of municipal experience, and I started in the town clerk's office. I've had experience doing a lot of organization, a lot of customer support, administering elections, and I've also had a lot of experience with conflict resolution. We, as a town, have about 22,000 people, so it's about half Leominster's population. And I think we have a pretty diverse background, kind of similar in a way to Leominster, because there's a lot of different cultures, a lot of different walks of life, a lot of small business owners, people who've been there for a long time. And I think that my skills from that experience and seeing that diverse culture, being able to organize and administer elections in a broad span for presidential elections and also administer permits and business certificates would make me a good candidate, and really brought me here for the challenge of the bigger, broader scope of Leominster.
Okay, good. All right, so Caitlin, this is kind of a follow-up to what you were talking about elections. Can you provide or share an experience in which you helped in the administration of a municipal election?
Yes. So in Acton, the town clerk would stay in the office to make sure that any big issues, if they did arise, would be taken care of there. She would man the voter registration information system, which is VRIS, which is what the system that you're registered and the state tracks for voter registration. And we would only call her if absolutely necessary to double check on a voter registration card or something like that. And so my role was to prepare the AutoMark, which is it's a machine that helps people who have disabilities or handicap be able to vote. We also help prepare the election machines and the ballot boxes to make sure that they're all set and they're counting the ballots the correct way to make sure everybody's vote is counted, because that's very important. And then we also actually set up the polls by ourselves. We put up all the booths and everything. And on election day, excuse me, what we would do is I would go between our precincts. We have 6 precincts in Acton, which is similar to the 6 wards here, but a smaller scale. And I'd make sure that the wardens are okay. There's no large problems going on with the wardens. There's no really upset voter, because it was important to make sure that the elections and the whole process was streamlined and efficient, so everybody could feel happy and proud of themselves. Thank you very much. And they could wrap up the election smoothly.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Very much. Now I'll hand it over to Councilor Frida for questions.
Caitlin, can you explain your management style to us?
Yes. So my management style, especially with the election workers, we had over 300 in Acton at 3 different shifts, would be listening, open communication, and really a lot of delegation. So I would talk to somebody if they had a problem, make sure to do a lot of training and listen to their concerns and their problems, because I still see them as an equal, as a person, because I don't think anybody's above and beyond anybody else, so that we could work as a team together and really manage the elections as a whole. And then if a problem did arise, which sometimes they did, I would have to make the hard decision and just take care of it as it was, because sometimes you have to put your foot down and do what needs to be done.
Okay. What type of training or experience have you had that would qualify you to be our clerk?
So I've gone to multiple conferences for certified municipal Massachusetts clerk credits. These conferences are run by Michelle Tassineri and a board that is usually a bunch of different clerks from around Massachusetts. and you would go and you take different types of things like election law, a business certificate administration, vital records law, and it would teach you the process and the importance of your role as a clerk. And they happen multiple times a year all over the state, so it's even for everybody. And those credits and then my experience in the town clerk's office qualified me for this position.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You have another question?
That's two.
Yeah,
John?
two. Oh, two, that's
Oh,
right.
I'm sorry.
What I asked.
Kayla, I'm going to ask you a technical question. If you can just describe for the council not only what the program is, but your experience with that program, specifically talking about VRIS program, the VIP program, also the various dog programs that you've been involved with, as well as any other software or municipal programs that you have experience with in your position as a clerk.
Absolutely. So VRIS, the Voter Registration Information System, is also lovingly known as the state system in the clerk's office. That's everybody's records are for when they registered to vote. So when you get go to the Registry of Motor Vehicles and you want to change your address and you also register to vote by checking the little box there, that gets bleeped over to the VRS system, and then you go in and you process it. Also in that system, you have your census information that you do yearly, and you update it to make sure that your voter registration and family registration is active, so you don't get kicked off the voting list over time, which takes some years. Also on that, you get your voter list for election day, and you can process that as well as pull extracts for the streets and the population in town. If anybody has an information request, it's a really good resource for that. For VIP, the Vital Information Partnership Program, so that's completely for vital records. So you, as a town clerk, would certify births, deaths, any vital records through that. Leominster would probably have a lot more because they have a birthing area in the hospital, and they have a hospital, so you tend to have an influx if you have a hospital nearby, because when you're going through that program, if you pass away in Leominster or you were a resident of Leominster when you passed away, you're going to get that record in that system. So the clerk would sign off on it in the final part, and sometimes if a town clerk is a burial agent, they would also supply that sign off as well. And then as far as other stuff goes, dog licenses, we don't have any programs like that in Acton, but we do have City Hall Systems, which is an online collections portal, and you're able to get like business certificates and licenses and pay money through that without the actual getting it right on the spot type of thing. And then we have this lovely thing called Munis, which is a collection software. So all permitting and money goes into that, and so the finance department can track it, and I've had a lot of experience with that as well.
Then I want to ask you a two-part question. If you could describe your educational background for the council and what you think are the three most important functions of the city clerk's office, and how your educational background helps you in that.
So my educational background stems from political science, which is essentially a lot of focus on how government's run, how government on multiple different levels, whether it's federal, state, municipal, local, affects people in the long term in the grand scheme of things. And that education, along with my experience and what I've learned from working within the town, has been extremely beneficial for this position, because I've learned the importance of customer support, because we're here as a support staff, and we're also here as the historian of the town or the city that we're in. We are here to provide people who come in with information. We're here to provide them with the records that they request, and we're here to help them administer their elections, but we're also here to listen to them and validate their concerns and help direct them in the future. So with my political science background and my experience as a whole, I feel like that educational piece definitely qualifies me there.
Okay, where did you go to school?
Fitchburg State University.
Okay, Madam Chair,
Madam Chair.
yield the floor back to you.
Yes. I'm just gonna do a little follow-up question.
course.
On some of the, what you just said to us. Can you give us an experience of when you researched information in the municipal archives for public officials or citizens?
Sure. So one common question that we get a lot is if there was a subdivision or there was another type of development in the town, eons back or even now in the future, people want to see those records and they want to understand what's going on. So you would have to research back on the Registry of Deeds, you have to go through different subdivision records that were submitted to the clerk's office or anything else that's pertinent to that information and kind of dig backwards in kind of like a treasure hunt in a way. And so to obtain that information and give it to that person. Sometimes you have to do that just in the clerk's office, but other times you have to talk to different departments within the city or the town to get that information because it's not always that readily available.
Okay, sounds like you like doing it too.
It's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. President, do you want to call on that?
Sure, thank you very much, thank you. We're gonna start right around here and go around. Councilor David Cormier?
Thank you very much. I guess I'm gonna put you on the spot for a minute and ask you maybe if you could sort of jog your mind and think about a time in your experience in working in the clerk's office where maybe there was a conflict that took place, maybe between two other employees that you were managing, or you know, a situation with somebody who came in from the public. You know, if you could maybe describe a little bit of what the conflict was without getting into too much detail, and you know, certainly not using names, but
Of course.
to kind of describe what the conflict was and how you resolved it.
Sure. So one great example of that is we have a warden in the town, and she was having a hard time with the elections because there's a lot of stress, especially when it's a presidential election, a contentious election. And there's quite a few people who unfortunately didn't make the cut for voter registration, so they came in and it's their right to vote, and they felt very strongly about that, and they care about that, and we can completely understand that. And she was getting the brunt of their concern, and they're upset because they weren't unable to vote in this election in our municipality. They would have to go to their previous municipality if they wanted to vote, because that's where they were still registered. And the warden, she was uncomfortable with that conflict, and she was having a hard time with that because she felt attacked. And so what I did is I pulled her aside and I talked to her about it, and I let her know that when people come in and they're upset, it's because they care about something. They care about the city and the town that they've grown up in. They've been here all their lives, and they want to be heard. They want to be validated, and they want to know the next steps that they can take for resolution so they can get answers and kind of peace of mind and closure. And so after we spoke about that and we really touched in on that, she kind of took a step back and thought about it and felt more comfortable in her role and was able to continue as a warden instead of step down.
Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Thank
Councilor Pauline Cormier?
Caitlin, actually, it's very fortuitous that you brought that up as an example, because my question has to do with any ideas that you might have on improving voter registration, making it easier access. Any thoughts that you have to streamline that?
So I think a really good way to improve that it would be to have election worker trainings at least once a year, if not twice, if there's going to be a state election or a presidential election coming up, because those are very big elections. I've actually previously, in my prior role, created an election worker handbook. And so when you signed on as an election worker after your training, we would hand that out so they had a resource if I wasn't available or one of the wardens weren't available right away, that they could actually look up a question they might have to aid them in the election process. And that seemed to help with a lot of like the minor questions that they might have, or the confusion when they strike out the people's names when they come in and state their name. And I think that's helped a lot.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilor Ottinger?
Ms. Huffman, you indicated in your resume that you're a self-motivated and focused individual.
Yes, sir.
Could you give me an example of project or a task that you took upon yourself without any initiative from someone else and accomplished that project?
Absolutely. I'm actually in the middle of one right now. As you know from my resume, I'm not currently in the clerk's office because there was a lack of personnel in the land use department, and they needed a body that was adaptable and willing to learn. I like to do both things. And one of our most recent projects that I took upon myself was, if you have a septic system, I know a lot of the city's sewered, but some people still have septic, and in Acton it's mostly septic. You have to pump your system every 2 years as per our Board of Health rules and regulations, and so people hadn't done that for well over 5 years. So I took on an 8,000 person mailing and drafted a letter, and I just actually accomplished it, up to 95% of the letters out as of yesterday, to let people know that they need to be more aware of their system so it doesn't fail, cost them more money in the future, and to consider reaching out to people that may not have reported to us that they have actually pumped.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Bonanza?
Thank you, Mr. President. Ms. Huffman,
Yes.
it's been nearly 2 years since you've been in the clerk's office.
Yes, sir.
And you alluded to a portion of why you're not there any longer. And I'm sure that the land use department calls on many very different skills than what the clerk's office calls for. Can you tell me more specifically why you left the clerk's office? And again, also, the second part of that, why you want to come back to a clerk's environment at this point in your career?
Absolutely. So I originally left the town clerk's office because the collector's office in Acton, I've gone through town hall, quite a few different spots. They didn't have enough people, which happens to be the story of the town hall. And within my job description, they actually put me as a floater, so that way I could move around if the town needed that kind of personnel. And so I started off in the collector's office, and they taught me all kinds of things about tax collections, assessments, the tax bill, how to do that and process that. And then their land use department, they actually had a renovation and they moved into a pit style, so everybody's in the same office in one big room, kind of similar to this. And they needed a staff person to kind of head the administrative assistants and meld them together so that they could work better, because they come from different departments, and it was a change for them. And so they had me go over there and kind of start working with them and the planning department, because they lost their admin to a different department in the town as well. And I enjoy learning things and getting new experiences. I think it's fun to challenge myself and be more of a resource to people who come into town hall. But my passion really lies in elections, in government, in how to administer that. I like to do vital records. I like the excitement of somebody coming in with a marriage and a new baby comes, and even the sadness of a death, which happens as well, but still kind of like being there as that person to talk with them, kind of get them through as they get the items that they need, and kind of continue on with their life. And I want to circle back to that.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Shalfo Zephyr?
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Ms. Huffman, thank you very much for coming in tonight. You touched on a little bit on each of the questions that I had, but I'll just circle back and maybe you can add a little bit to them. One of the things that I was interested in is what was your biggest challenge that you faced in managing, in being involved in elections? If you could talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So I feel like the biggest challenge when it comes to elections is probably organization with the election and the best customer support possible, because no matter how organized you are, no matter how friendly you are and open and willing to listen, there's always going to be something that's going to step above that. And that challenge is definitely there, but it's also a fun challenge. It's something like you can use problem-solving skills and delegate different tasks to a team and work together to overcome.
And did you supervise people in that?
Yes.
On elections, right?
Yep, I supervise the wardens, the clerks, and all the staff underneath them.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And I just wanted to go back to, on your resume, oversee training of election officers and personnel. And I know that you mentioned the election training handbook.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about what your role is or was in training election workers?
So I would actually go through the entire process with them. I'd invite them out. I'd schedule them each on their own training slots and try to be considerate, because a lot of our workers work full-time and then others don't, so we did multiple different shifts. And I was in charge of actually teaching them the Mass General laws that went with the elections training, and making sure they understood fully what they were getting themselves into, and then we'd actually do a mock election, and so they could practice with a pretend list and a scenario so they can really see and understand. So I was in charge of setting that all up, making the PowerPoint, making a video we did too of a mock election, as well as setting up the circuit for the mock election.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm now going to open it up to the members of the council that are not members of the Ways and Means, in case you have another question you'd like to ask, or if you need any clarification on one of the responses. So if you do, you can raise your hand at your convenience. Okay, I'll yield the floor back to the chairwoman. You're all set?
I'm all set. Any members of the Ways and Means Committee want to ask another question or comment? Okay, so Caitlin, I'm just going to wrap it up by asking you, why would you be the successful candidate for this position?
Sure. Honestly, I think I have the experience and the attitude for this position. This position can have a lot of challenges with it, but I always look at things positively, and I like challenges. I like learning. I'm adaptable. I'm highly organized, and I like problem solving. I also like to work as a team, and I would have a team here that would be able to help me help and support the staff here and also the citizens, which is very key because I'm the support person for the town and the governing body, and I would be definitely qualified to do so.
Well, thank you very much for coming here this evening. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Caitlin, thank you. In our timeline, I wasn't sure if you were here when I announced it previously. So the Ways and Means Subcommittee will be meeting Wednesday night, and then we have a meeting on the 14th, and they'll be coming back with a recommendation at that point.
Thank
Okay?
you very much.
Thank you very much. Madam Chair, you ready for the next candidate?
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming in.
One question that came up, I was asking the same thing, Councilor Frida, to myself. Are the councilors that are not on the committee asking the same questions to each one of the candidates? You're not held to those? Taking a look at the resume or hearing something that you heard, if you want to come back with something else, feel free to. Don't forget you have a second round also if you need it. Okay, Councilor, go ahead.
So the next interview is Stephen Andrew James Pottle.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Thank you for coming.
Of course, thank you for having me.
So your resume states that your name is Stephen Andrew James Pottle, but we did have a conversation when we interviewed that you are mostly known as AJ. So I will let the council know if they want to call you by that name. Okay, so AJ, since that's what we were calling you during our interview, I have a similar question to one that I asked you at the interview. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you applied for this position?
Of course. So I just want to start off by thanking everyone for the opportunity to be here today. It's certainly a privilege to be able to come and speak before this body for this great opportunity. So yeah, my name is AJ Pottle, named after my two grandfathers. I'm here today, really, my capacity at the City of Worcester is Assistant City Clerk. So my jobs and my duties are specifically pertaining to City Council matters, as well as birth, death, marriage, vital records. The other Assistant City Clerk of Worcester primarily focuses on the election side. I applied to this position because I have been coming to Leominster for quite a long time. My aunt lived here ever since she moved from Worcester when she got married. And I always really liked it here. I always thought it was a great environment and one that, you know, to be the city clerk of would be definitely a very serious privilege and one that I appreciate even the opportunity to be able to speak for you with.
Okay, good. All right. So, I know you said that most of what you do is city council work, but I would like you to share an experience in which you helped in the administration of a municipal election.
Of course, absolutely. So I would say without question, the city of Worcester was very proud of our early voting rollout. It was very extensive in comparison to a lot of the other communities. We chose to have 5 different locations in the 5 different districts of the city, and each one of them created their own problems, their own challenges, creating and making sure that we had enough staff for all that. In general, during an election, the city of Worcester staffs about 7 people per precinct, and there's 50 precincts, so for about 350 people. So I've been involved in hiring those people, I've been involved in overseeing them and making sure that they are prepared for that job. Beyond that, I think making sure that our rollout for early voting was done properly and done within the state regulations was extremely difficult because of how large our rollout was, making sure that each district had its own location and we were available on the weekends. But it was one that we were definitely very proud of, and one that I was definitely very proud to be a part of.
Thank you. All right, so I'll hand it off to Councilor Frida.
AJ, can you tell me elaborate a little bit on your management style?
Absolutely. So my management style is definitely trying to be as positive as possible, making sure that everyone is aware that I want to be a support for them. I think we talked about during the Ways and Means Committee that when I walked into the city clerk's office, I was sort of expecting a man in the side of a room just sort of, reading the paper and doing this, and I was greeted with something very differently with David Rushford, the city clerk of Worcester at the time, and that sort of rubbed off on me quite a bit. I'm very interested in having an open door policy, making sure that I'm supporting my staff as well as the city council staff to the best of my ability, and making sure that I can answer phone calls and emails as quickly as I possibly can. I believe that if you do this, it creates the right environment for a work system.
What training or experience have you had to make you qualified to be our clerk?
Of course. So I think mostly my experience regarding city council has really helped me and groomed me for a city clerk position. I've been fortunate in that I've been given a lot of opportunities by the last 2 city clerks to clerk a lot of different meetings. My understanding is at the city of Leominster, you have your own clerks within your committees that takes care of things, but it has been my experience that a clerk or assistant city clerk, or even as a staff assistant at the time, I took committee meetings and I maintained all the minutes for those meetings. So for the last 5 years, it's something that I've been doing and doing regularly. When the city clerk is on vacation, I am the one that clerks and that clerks all of the various city council meetings, so in front of the entire body. So I've sort of been doing it for a very long time already in my eyes and in basically my experiences. So I think that I'm just ready for the next step at this point. I think I'm really excited at the opportunity and possibility of it, and I'm ready to roll into it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Dabrowski.
AJ, can you describe your technical experience? And I'd like you to describe your experience with VRIS, VIP, the various dog programs in the city of Worcester, and also other IT experience you've had, programs that you have experience using.
Oh, absolutely. So the city of Worcester has quite a few different programs that we roll out. We have had homegrown programs that have been made by our technical services department, specific to birth, death, marriage, business certificates, dogs, all of those. I am very comfortable learning all sorts of different programs and all their various capabilities. Within specifically looking at the state programs, I feel extremely comfortable in VIP. It's a system that I think had its bugs to begin with at the state level, but has since become very, very usable for me. Whether that be birth amendments, whether that be establishing births, establishing deaths, understanding whether or not the attestations are on the death certificates. All of those things are extremely important, and they create a lot of attention to detail. But I feel very comfortable in all of them, and even in registering voters and everything else, it's something that I've had quite a bit of experience in. Beyond that, I was fortunate enough to work specifically with the city clerk's office to kind of streamline our notices. In specifically traffic and parking, it was a committee that I was sort of tasked with since the beginning of my time there. We have sent out thousands upon thousands of notices pretty much every single meeting as a result of that, and it used to be a week-long process that now takes 2 days because I was able to implement a mail merge system there, and it really, it's literally just a Word document meeting an Excel document, but it's really streamlined us, and it's something that I kind of take pride in, and making sure that people get their notice quickly, because in some circumstances, meetings will come up sort of out of nowhere, and you have to be prepared to, and you have to be able to send those notices out in a way that people can actually come to meetings for.
And then I have a quick question and then one more substantive question. But just if you could just describe your educational background for the council.
Of course, absolutely. So I was fortunate enough to go to Boston College. For 4 years, I graduated with a history degree there, and I also graduated with a secondary education. When the job opportunity of principal staff assistant position opened up with Worcester, it was one that I jumped on. I did originally plan on being a teacher, but this career path just felt right for me. It was one that I felt very comfortable in it, and it allowed me to sort of flex my history knowledge a little bit more than my teaching knowledge, and one that I really appreciate because I definitely am a history buff.
Okay. And then your resume indicates Clark University.
That's correct, yes. I'm in progress for a master's in public administration there. It's something that the city of Worcester has set up. You can get sort of, I guess it's not a stipend, it's the wrong word, but it's sort of, it allows you, yeah, exactly. It allows you to go there for a lessened cost. So it's been something I've been taking advantage of and haven't completed yet, but something I'm trying to continue.
And if you could, just in your experience, what are the 3 most important functions of the city clerk's office?
Of course, absolutely. So I think without question the most important function is maintaining the birth certificates. I think we're seeing in our community a lot of problems, and I'm sure Worcester or Leominster is as well, because people are coming in for the real IDs. This new initiative taking place, you need to have your birth certificate and you need to have a marriage certificate if your last name changed as a result of marriage. There are some inconsistencies that come up, especially, immigrant Italian families, whether or not it ends in an A or an O, things of that nature. We're seeing this come up more and more. So making sure that our birth records are correct, so all of your residents and all of your community members have the right documentation moving forward is extremely important to me, and I think that's definitely number 1. Beyond that, I think that providing people with a voice is extremely important to me, making sure that all the documentation is necessary so people are always organized and so that people are always available to speak to city councilors when appropriate, making sure that all of those needs are met. Lastly, I think maintaining city council's records are extremely important to me as well. I think making sure that all the documentation is always organized in a way that is appropriate for you, is logical to you, is one of my strengths because it's been something that I've been working on for 5 years now, and something that I think I'd be able to do very well for you all.
Thank you. Councilor Feckley, your committee all set?
Yes.
Okay.
I just have one follow-up question
Sure.
for AJ. AJ, so you spoke about your love of history and the archives. Can you talk a little bit about what programs you've worked on for the archives, or any specific change you've made in the archives at the City of Worcester?
Of course, thank you, Councilor. So yes, I actually recently was able to write a grant for the City of Worcester, which enabled us to recently have someone come into our vault and take a look at sort of the environmental effects that were taking place in our vault. And it was absolutely eye-opening. I learned a lot about the various things that were going on in our vault environmentally, and making sure that all of our documents were stored in a proper way. I definitely take pride in making sure that our vault is organized in a way that would be available to the residents of our community at all times, organized and in a fashion that is very presentable. I found out information about, humidity levels within a vault and what the appropriate, organization of vaults are, whether or not a document is weighing on itself, and in 200 years, what would it look like, and in 300 years, what would it look like, and that was absolutely one of the most amazing things that I was able to be a part of, because, I even learned how to repair paper using cornstarch, which was an absolutely wild experience. But now some of our documents that were ripped back in the 40s, 50s are starting to be mended, and we're starting to see some of those documents come back into play, and it's something I'm very proud of.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All set?
All set.
Okay, thank you. I'll go
Oh,
back
I'm
to
sorry.
Councilor
Oh,
Frida, go ahead.
Yeah, Councilor Frida.
Just one quick question. It's my understanding that when the clerk is away in Worcester, that you're the assistant clerk that takes her place?
That is correct, yes. So I've sat in at 2 city council meetings for the clerk. There was one instance where the city clerk had an emergency surgery, and I filled in that day without knowing that I was going to be filling in that day for her. I took that city council meeting, and I think that meeting went just as smoothly as they usually do. I made sure to watch the weeks before, and then I made sure to watch the previous city clerk at one of his meetings just to make sure I had it down right, but I felt very comfortable in that sense. And there was another meeting where the city clerk was on vacation that I took her duties totally and completely, and felt very comfortable in the chair.
Thank you.
Okay, all set? Madam Chair, you good?
I'm good.
Okay, I'm gonna reverse it this time to be fair. Councilor Shalfo Zephyr, you have the first question.
Sure. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, AG, for coming in. My question, do you have direct staff? Do you manage people currently?
That is correct, yes. We have a staff of about 13, and then obviously there's the 3 management positions of clerk and the 2 assistant city clerks within Worcester. I manage all the people that oversee all of city council, which is about 3 or 4 people, and then probably about 6 or 7 others are specifically to our vital records department.
Okay. And can you talk about a time when you were faced a particular challenge and how you solved the problem?
Yes, absolutely. So I think every day is definitely a different day within the city clerk's office, and that's one of the reasons why I really like working in a city clerk's office. I particularly remember one instance where a gentleman who was deaf came into our office, and he was trying to file a petition for a handicap parking space, and it was extremely difficult for him to communicate with us in a way that was appropriate, and a lot of the staff was getting a little frustrated as a result because they wanted to help him and were kind of met with barriers to no one's fault. I was able to utilize something my community has that is, it's called a language bank, and find someone that can bring up an iPad and speak with the person. And we were able to finally figure out that he wanted a handicap parking space, and he wanted no parking also in a different portion of the street. And we were able to write out all of those petitions for him and sign them for him, or not sign them for him, but make sure that he signed them. And that was definitely very rewarding when we were actually able to get him happy and get him sort of calm down and make sure that the documents that he needed to be prepared were prepared. And we also were able to note that for committee meetings, and we had multiple people and translators there for him during the committee meeting as well.
Can you talk a little bit about your elections experience?
We're gonna hold off, we're gonna go around.
Sorry.
Okay, we'll get back to you, hold
Okay.
that question.
All right.
Councilor Bonanza?
AJ, in your resume, and you've alluded to it briefly, the City of Worcester has some homegrown software that it uses in its, in the clerk's office. Can you tell me, are there any of those that you can envision bringing or adapting to use in Leominster? And did you have a role in the development of any of that software?
Of course. So the programs were developed before I started with the city. However, I became very, very comfortable in all of them. Most of them were part of our vitals programs before the state took them over. So in 2011, we're looking at the state taking over births, and then 2013 taking over deaths. So those 2 programs wouldn't be appropriate for this community. However, our dog program is very efficient and something that I'm pretty sure is available for purchase. we're able to register about 7,000 dogs in our community every year and do so in a very efficient manner. We just recently implemented dog parks in our city, and making sure that all of those dog tags every year are set up properly sort of enables the police department in Worcester to make sure that everyone's up to date that's inside of our dog parks. I think that could definitely be very appropriate. Beyond that, our marriage program is also another program that very, very comfortable with and could see some use in. I think the state will eventually take it over, but at this point, it's not really on the radar in comparison to some other things that we're overseeing. So that could definitely be appropriate as well.
Thank you.
Councilor Oettinger?
Mr. Bottle, thank you for coming in tonight. I appreciate your time. Just a quick comment. I noticed that in your basically last, 6 years, you've changed positions about 5 different times, and each one in kind of a different field. Have these all helped you in some way become the better person that would be a good city clerk for Leominster?
So within the last 5 years, I've worked in the city clerk's office as all of those 5 years. I was a principal staff assistant in the same office for the first, I would say, 3 years, and then I've been an assistant city clerk for about 2 now.
Oh.
So I'm not sure.
Okay. I'm just looking at, in 2010, you were working at UMass Memorial Hospital?
Oh, that's correct, yes. So when
Okay,
I was in
so-
college, I worked at UMass,
Okay.
sort of as a college summer job there. I was
So-
patient transport for
So
for
these
that,
were,
yeah.
these were summer jobs primarily before you became the assistant clerk in Worcester?
That's correct, yeah. So right when I graduated in 2013, for a little portion of time, or actually probably for about a year, I worked at Boston College. I worked for the Lynch Leadership Academy there. That was a very good experience as well. That experience was particularly in relation to teaching, and was particularly in relation to organizing the various principals in the Boston area for meetings that we have in order to character build in that area and make sure that Boston College had a good outreach in that community. I thought that was really good experience just because it was an organizational one, and one that sort of honed me for when I came into the clerk's office 5 years ago. And I definitely appreciate that experience completely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Pauline Cormier?
AJ, same question. I want to know what ideas that you have to improve voter registration, voter access.
Absolutely. So I think Lynn has done a great job in your community making sure that the elections were running as smoothly as possible. But one thing that I think would be extremely helpful would be just continuing outreach in communities. The city of Worcester set up a program called Early Rising that we bring in students to be poll workers. The state regulations allow 16 and 17-year-olds to be poll workers under certain circumstances, so if they're selected by their principals. So it's a program that is headed by our election department, admittedly, but one that I think is very helpful and could help Leominster because it gets the kids involved. Making sure kids are pre-registered and then registered is an extremely important, extremely helpful thing, and I think it creates a different environment that a lot of other places don't have, and that would be something that I think would be extremely important to bring to Leominster so that people were involved at a young age and then just continued moving forward as time went on.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor David Cormier?
Okay, thank you very much. I have a similar question as well. Can you think of a time when there was a conflict with 2 individuals maybe that you were managing, or some kind of a heated conflict with a resident that had come in, and what did you do to to resolve that issue?
Of course. So I think within our office and within the city clerk's office, there's always going to be conflicts, and there's always going to be sort of different ideas coming in one play. I think I've come across more circumstances that I can count with, the city clerk and I constantly wondering, what is the best thing for a resident of our community? How can we organize public speaking so that everyone has a chance to speak? How can we organize a city council meeting? How can we organize all sorts of various things? And I think just making sure that everyone's voice is heard is going to be the most important way to create that sort of the right environment for those things. And I think that would probably be how I handle that situation.
Thank you.
We're now into second opportunity for non-Ways and Means Committee members. I know Councilor Shalfo Zephyr, you had another question maybe?
I was just going to follow up on your experience during elections. What's your role in the city?
Of course, so the elections department is headed by our other assistant city clerk. My job during those elections is sort of to go into the field when necessary and, you know, fix various machines. During our early voting session, I specifically remember being rushed by a police officer down our main street to make sure that our printing apparatus was operating correctly because there was a line starting to pile up. So it's sort of just, there are so many things on any given election day that you have no idea they're going to go wrong until they go wrong. And it's just, my role is basically to get into the community and make sure anything's fixed that needs to be fixed. It's also going back to the office and making sure that phone calls are being answered because people are constantly calling, asking, you know, where they're registered. So looking them up in the program provided by the state to make sure that they're registered in the right place, or if they're registered in a different community, or things of that nature. So those are sort of my day-to-day, or my election day
Right.
operations specifically.
And do you provide support staff? Are you the support staff for the city council?
Yes, that is correct. I am the direct person that handles most city council affairs and making sure all their committee agendas and minutes are prepared.
Do you respond to requests for information, or if a city councilor needs something, are you the go-to person for them?
Yes, absolutely. So we have a program that we organize all of our city council data in. So that data goes back to 1998 because of an initiative I took up to make sure that a lot of the documentation was scanned in. Ever since the city clerk that I started under, all that documentation was in. So any report dating back to about that time period is available because of different searches that I can do in that program now.
Thank you.
All set?
Thank you, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Council Bonanza.
AJ, have you ever been involved in a recount or an election investigation? And can you tell me what your role, if any, was with those?
So we were very close to a recount while I was with the city clerk's office, but we never actually had one. We prepared for one. We set up a city council chamber to make sure that all the documentation was ready. But we were, I guess, fortunate in the sense that I've never had to deal with a recount at this point.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Madam Chair?
Is my committee all set?
Yep.
Okay, all right. So Adrian, I'm just gonna ask you the one wrap-up question. Why would you be the successful candidate for this position?
Thank you, Counselor. So I think that I bring a very positive attitude anywhere that I work. I think that I work very hard, I work very diligently, and I'm very excited to be part of local government. I think making sure that every single person in your community's voice is heard is very important to me, and I think it's very important to the success of a city clerk's office. And I think that my attitude and my ability to understand those things, my writing capabilities, would all prove to be very helpful to the city of Leominster.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you very much to the
Thank you.
entire
Thank
body.
you.
I really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Again, Ways and Means will be going into session Wednesday night, so someone will be in touch, probably one way or the other.
Of course, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Okay, Counselor, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Our next interviewee is Nicolin Vangeley. Nicolin, you can come right up here.
Good evening.
Evening.
Nice to see you again.
You as well.
Okay, and I will pronounce, I know you told us how to pronounce your last name, and I'm going to say it, Vangeley.
Vangeley, right.
Vangeley, okay. And I know that you prefer to be called
Nico is fine. I know Nicolin is a little hard for people first time pronunciation, but Nico is completely fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so Nico, thank you for coming. Nice to see you again. So you were here for some of the interview, I'm going to ask you some questions, and then the other two members of the Ways and Means Commission will ask you, committee will ask you questions, and then we'll open it up to the city councilors.
Sounds
Okay?
great. Thank you for having me this afternoon.
Okay. So my first question to you is, or actually just to ask you, to tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe some things that maybe aren't on your resume, or elaborate on some things on your resume, and why you applied for this position.
Okay, great. So I originally moved to the United States in Worcester in 2001. I'm originally from Albania. I've lived in Worcester about 17 years now, and I went through Worcester Public Schools, graduated from Claremont Academy. Afterwards, I got my bachelor's degree from the College of the Holy Cross with a degree in political science. And while working for the clerk's office, I also obtained a master's degree from Clark University in public administration. So my first kind of exposure to the clerk's office was when I was in high school. I was part of this program that the clerk's office at the time was doing, was Worcester Rising. It was a civics camp, an initiative started by the previous clerk to kind of engage young adults who were in high school into local government and make sure that they had an understanding of what local government looked like, and also make them aware of the opportunities there are within the city administration. So after that internship, I started working as an intern in the clerk's office, and then through my college years, I provided operational support, whether it was election days or in some of the periods leading up to the election. I received my bachelor's degree from Holy Cross, and afterwards I was hired as a principal staff assistant, and I provided support to the election division as well as, other assistants as the clerk would require, whether it was within the front office or the election department. After a few months working as a principal staff assistant, the assistant director of elections at that time went on to work for the federal State Department, so for the Secretary of State. And I took over that role as assistant director. I think it was within 10 months of being principal staff assistant. Afterwards, I served as an assistant director for the Election Commission for 2 years. Then actually, about 2 years ago in August, I was promoted to assistant city clerk. The way, as probably AJ explained to you earlier, the city clerk's department has 3 divisions. It has the front office, which is vital records and public record requests. It has the city council office, which is the middle office, provides support to the city councilors and the public through orders or any kind of petitions that come in for sidewalks or street repair and so on. Then we have the election division. The election division is, the city clerk's office also provides support to the Board of Election Commissioners. We have 5 board members. So in that role, as assistant city clerk, I've served for 2 years. But in total, I have almost 5 years of experience in serving the Board of Election Commissioners, working in the city clerk's office. And I saw this opportunity to apply for the Leominster city clerk position, and I thought it was a great opportunity, and I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak this afternoon.
Thank you. So can you elaborate, I know that you have, most of what you do is the elections division, but can you elaborate on some of the preparation and the processing that you have to do, say, for example, to get ready for a presidential election or the early voting, or whatever you feel you want to elaborate on, so the council knows more about that.
Of course. So a lot of people, when they think of election day, they think of 1 day or 2 days throughout the year. But actually, as for a lot of clerks around the state can attest and around the country, is that there actually goes a lot of work goes behind that election. And our work starts as early as January. In January, we start preparing the street listing, which is our annual listing of residents within the city of Worcester, in this case, the city of Leominster. And we work with vendors, or if we don't have vendors, we work locally within our office to print out census forms. And these are annual census forms that have to be mailed out to each resident in the city of Leominster, in this case, or the city of Worcester. And after those residents receive those forms, they confirm their information, making sure their name, their address, their date of birth, their occupation is correct, and they mail them back to our office. When the forms are mailed back to our office, we have to go through all those forms. In the case of the city of Worcester, we have about, I believe we sent out this past January, about 83,000 forms. So then those forms come back to our office, and we're in charge, my division is in charge of processing all those changes, processing the no changes, updating the census year. So in this case, we have to update the 2018 census year. We also make it easier on the residents. We have a lot of residents that don't want to mail those forms or bring them in person, so we've set up an online response option, and we work with our technical service department. So the resident will go into our city website, pull up their street address. After pulling up their street address, they put their voter ID, which is actually on the census form. They put the voter ID, and it comes up their household information. If they have no changes, they can submit that no change confirmation online, and they are completed with the 2018 census process. Once the census period has passed, or in between the census period as well, we are also certifying nomination papers. We're actually going through right now through the nomination paper certification process, which is for the 2018 November state election as well as September. So we're certifying all those residents that signed petition papers for candidates to be on the ballot in September and November. Then after this certification of signatures, that period passes, we're moving on to the inactive confirmation season or period. Anyone who did not respond to the 2018 street listing that we sent out in January or February, they become inactive starting June 1st. So then we have to mail to every resident who fails to respond to the street listing, letting them know that they are now inactive, and in order to be put back on the active list, they have to respond to that confirmation card. So we're also still managing this. While we're doing this, we're also confirming polling locations. Now, in this case, because we have this year we have early voting, we're working with the early voting locations to make sure that they're able to host us once again. You know, we're supporting the Board of Election Commissioners on a monthly basis. There's a lot of work that goes on. Then come June or sometime later in June, we will start calling all our poll workers and, you know, reminding them there's a September election, there's a November election. We provide training for every single election. So come August, our office provides training. So we basically have 300 poll workers that manage 50 locations. In addition to those 300 poll workers, I have about 67 police officers. So one per location. We have 50 precincts in the city. We also have spares in case there's an emergency, and also runners that run material back and forth. So it's a large operation. And by the way, I apologize, I skipped over. When we're doing the census forms and the certification of nomination papers, we're also having this program that our office runs. It's called the Worcester Rising. We initiate 50 high school students. And as I mentioned earlier, I was a graduate myself in 2008 of this program. So since I've come back to the office, I've made sure it continues on, and we've had it for the past 5 years. We're recruiting 50 high school students to go through this, you know, civics camp, to let them learn more about local government. In October, we go back to the high schools. We register and pre-register their peers. After the October session, we train those students, and they're able to work November 6th or whenever the election is in November. So in addition to the 300 students, we're also in charge of training 50 students. So I'm sorry, 300 poll workers, we're in charge of training 50 students and, you know, 60 some police officers, making sure that they're understanding, you know, the Mass General laws and making sure that the procedures on election day are followed as Secretary of State regulations, our local charters, and so on.
That made me tired.
I apologize. There's a lot. There's a lot of things that go into elections. And
All right, I'm going to pass it on to Councilor Frida. Thank you.
Nico, can you explain your management style?
And as I think I mentioned during our previous conversations, is I have a motto: trust but verify. I expect that the employees to, I provide the proper training, and I provide the proper guidance, and I expect that, using their training and using their guidance, that whether it comes from me or other managers within the division or my assistant, that they perform their responsibilities diligently. But I also verify. I think, within our election department, our software has a lot of reporting options. When it comes to certifying signatures, as I mentioned earlier, we are trusting that the clerks are certifying those signatures. But at the end of the process, for example, for one candidate, I have the reporting option to verify that every single resident that is checked off on that, nomination paper is accounted for. So we do have reporting options. And then also, there is also within that software, as I mentioned, reporting options. But I also give the clerk or the staff person that is in charge of that, whether it's absentee, voter registration, or so on, the confidence that I trust you, and you have to rely on the training, but come at the end of it, I also verify.
what type of training or experience have you had that qualifies you to be a city clerk?
As I mentioned earlier, I've started in the clerk's office when I was, just a high school student, and then moved to kind of worked alongside, the previous clerk in colleges. Then when I graduated, I took on a full-time responsibility. I've seen a lot of scenarios within my years. We've managed a large operation, well as early voting, municipal elections, state elections, providing support to the Board of Election Commissioners. I think I have the necessary experience and knowledge of, Mass General laws, as well as some of the regulations that are required to be carried out by the city clerk, whether it's in the city of Worcester or the city of Leominster.
How many people do you specifically have for staff?
So in terms of our office, we're made up of 3 staff assistants, myself included. I'm the 4th person. The city clerk is the 5th kind of full-time / part-time position. Then we have the Board of Election Commissioners, which assist us during election time. There are 5 board members. And then we have the 300 poll workers, which are temporary employees. As I mentioned, the 67 police officers and the 50 students that assist us on a regular basis for each election.
So how many people do you specifically supervise?
3.
Though? 3?
Yep.
Thank you.
Council Feckley?
Actually, I think it's my turn.
No, it's, yeah.
I'm sorry.
I wasn't ready, yeah.
That's all right.
I was gonna be ready, but I wasn't ready.
That's all right.
Go ahead.
Nico, on your resume, you indicate appear before the Board of Election Commissioners, City Council, legislative committees, court officials, citizen groups, and the media to explain election results, procedure, and related matters. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So in terms of city council, we prepare a budget. Our department prepares a budget for every single, every single fiscal year. It's my responsibility to go before the city council, as well as with the city clerk, to explain to the city council the budget and some of the figures that have gone in that budget. For example, we're asking for money for early voting this upcoming fiscal year. We have to explain to them our master plan that's been approved by the Board of Election Commissioners. So that's one avenue there. In terms of the Board of Election Commissioners themselves, I go to every single meeting. I'm in charge of reporting to them our different initiatives within our office. Come census time, I'm reporting to them that this many forms have been sent out. We're in the process of certifying these, or just processing these many forms. Same thing for nomination papers. When it comes to the early voting location, polling location confirmations. And then around election time, we're constantly being interviewed by the media, whether it's about our initiatives, whether it's early voting initiatives, election day initiatives. The civics camp, I just had an interview just a few weeks ago about the civics camp that the media came in and kind of interviewed some of our students, interviewed myself, the clerk, and some of the partners that we work with. So we're constantly working with the media. In terms of election time, around on election day especially, is they're asking for, the numbers or any kind of communication that would come from our office.
And we've heard a lot about your experience with elections. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience with some of the other functions or actions that go on in a city clerk's office? I'm talking about vital statistics, dog licensing, city council, archives, and your experience with the relative computer programs and applications relative to those functions.
So in terms of, as I mentioned, the clerk's office is divided into 3 sections: the vital records office, the front, then the city council and elections. I am in charge of the election department, but whenever the assistant city clerk, which is in charge of city council, or the city clerk are not present, I'm able to provide, operational support to those departments. I also provide overview to that staff as well. I am fairly familiar with the marriage system as well as the vital record system. But we trust that, whenever the clerk is out, that the actual staff person working, whether it's with dog or marriage licensing, is able to carry out that duty. If not, that's when I come in and I'm able to assist them, whether it's with the program or with the policy.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you. All set?
Yep, I'm all set. That was my question, so he
Okay.
answered my question.
All right, we'll go around to the councilors, beginning with Councilor David Cormier.
Thank you. Again, I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked the other two candidates. Since you do manage people, can you think of a time when there was a conflict between two employees that you were managing, or maybe a member of the public that was pretty heated that you needed to sort of diffuse and find a resolution to? Can you give an example and explain how you resolved that?
Of course, thank you for that question. So we do work in the public sector, and we have, members, residents of the city or the town that will come in, and they are not informed of the process. And sometimes those conversations could get heated. I've always had this policy that, my first goal is to make sure I understand what you're requesting of me. So I think, first I hear them out. I kind of try to grasp understanding of the complaint or the problem that they're having difficulty with. Then I'll be able to address them by, if it's an election-related question, if for some reason the voter is, registered in the wrong location and they are claiming that they have mailed in their registration form, but for some reason we haven't processed or have not received it, I would be able to go back to our system and kind of verify and assist them with it and provide them the proper guidance and proper channels that they can follow in order to change it. But I think the first step is understanding what their complaint is. And then the second step is, trying to calm them down and explain them the process. I think a lot of people, when they come to our counters, they're not informed. And my goal as our department's responsibility is to make sure that these people are informed and they understand, some of our regulations, because it could be within the regulations that we're only allowed to do certain things. But informing them and educating them about the process usually helps them calm them down. And, within my department, I've created avenues that are right at our fingertips. If a voter comes in with a complaint, we scan every single voter registration or absentee application that comes in through the mail. So within a few seconds, we're able to pull up that information. So if the voter's saying, in September they go to vote and they're registered as a Democrat, but they're really registered as unenrolled, we're able to pull that registration and show to them that this is when we received it, and this is what you signed. And in that case, usually they calm down and kind of realize. But I think creating avenues to, even the staff members, they're trained to make sure that we diffuse situations, not spike them up, because what will happen from there is, the voter will rush out because they're still not, convinced or, at least explained of the process. They'll go to the mayor's office next, even to the media. And my goal as a department is to make sure, and that's my responsibility, to make sure the voters and the residents of the city of Worcester are educated and are understanding the process.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Pauline Cormier.
Hi, I have again, somewhat of the same question. I like the idea of the program that you have with the high school kids, but do you have any other ideas of your own that you would use to improve voter registration, voter access?
I think some of those things are still in the work. We have automatic registration that's in the works, and I think that's a great idea, and I think the Secretary of the State as well has come in favor of that, and some other, government officials at the state level. Automatic registration will help the clerks as well as the election commissioners around the state to kind of increase our voter registration numbers. That's one initiative. I think another one will help voter turnout, especially in municipal election, is to have the cities or towns opt in and have an early voting in municipal elections. And that's something, I've written to the state delegation as well as to the Secretary of State at the city of Worcester, where I think the mayor and as well as the city manager have come out in favor of it, that they were willing to explore early voting in municipal elections. That's something that will hopefully increase our turnout. Because I think you look around the state and the voter turnout around the state, it's very low when it comes to municipal elections. We don't have that problem come presidential election or state elections, but come municipal elections, that kind of voter interest dies down, which is unfortunate. But we're hoping that early voting, being able to opt in early voting will increase those numbers and give people more opportunity. Because I think that's what we hear a lot from the residents is, we only have one day, which is election day. Even though we try to educate them that there's absentee voting, that you can cast your ballot through the mail, but I think they still want to go through that process and show up in person. And that's what early voting will help with that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilor Frank Ottinger.
Thank you for coming in today, Nico. And I have one question. Can you give me a situation of your own initiative that you initiated a project or a process and completed it to complete success?
Well, thank you for that question, and thank you for having me. I think my example would be the 2016 early voting. In 2016, I think around April, our former city clerk retired, and we have a new city clerk that came in. I think working with the new city clerk with kind of the plan that the Board of Election Commissioners had voted on, we were able to provide the residents of Worcester with 5 early voting locations during the week, 5 on Saturday and 5 on Sunday, of course, then 5 on the repeating week. So we were giving them ample opportunities to cast their ballots. In that program, I brought in new technology, which some other cities around the state did, which was the iPad technology in the city. And using the iPad technology, we're allowing voters to vote at any early voting location. So if you were living on the west side and all of a sudden you were working in downtown Worcester and we had early voting opening in downtown Worcester, it didn't matter that you were registered in the west side, you can actually come in and vote in downtown Worcester. So any resident within the city was able to cast ballots at those early voting locations. They were not specific like Election Day that you have to go to your own precinct, but they were universal. So we had all 7 ballot types in the city at any of those locations, and whichever you were closest to or most convenient to you, you can cast that ballot. So I think bringing that technology really helped. This was the first time the state was doing it, so training those poll workers who had never performed early voting before was also another thing that we were able to accomplish within the clerk's office. And in the end result, it proved very successful. We had about 16,000 people that casted early voting ballots.
And that was on your own program that you did that? You ran that whole program yourself?
In cooperation with the city clerk and the Board of Election Commissioners.
Okay.
But as I explained to you, we are a three-division department. The city clerk oversees all 3 departments, but she entrusts the responsibility within the assistant city clerks to kind of run their own divisions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Council Bonanza.
Thank you. Nico, can you give me a specific example of how you used your education or your master's degree in public administration to better your performance as an assistant city clerk?
Well, thank you for that question. So I think when I was working in the clerk's office, I was also attending a master's program at Clark University. Some of the lessons we were learning in the classroom at Clark were actually being applied within my department. I took over that department at a very young age. I think I was about 24 when I took over as assistant director. And, a new manager, we had employees who were, had been there for a few years. And they were, in terms of, I was the youngest from within that office, trying to convince them that these were some of the new initiatives we were taking on, trying to kind of see what their experience was and help them kind of, as I was mentioned earlier, we have this new initiative where we scan everything now. Well, there's absentee applications, voter registrations, trying to get them on board, and using some of my knowledge within the management class that was taken to making sure that the program where I was implementing was being implemented correctly. So it did come, and I think every time I went and attended those classes, I can see, the management style that was kind of progressing toward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Shalfo-Zephyr.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming in. Can you tell us about a time, or can you describe a significant challenge in your management of an election day and how you dealt with it?
So I came in to work for the city in 2013. I've gone through municipal elections. Actually, right now, I think 3 municipal elections, because we had one in 2013, 2015, and 2017. I managed, this will be my second state election, 1 presidential election. Every election has its difficulties. I think from all those elections, the presidential election was the most challenging one, because we're not only, gearing up for election day, we were also performing early voting, which was very stressful on the staff as well as, the poll workers. So that was, I think, my most difficult election, but we dealt it with calm. We were given this regulation, it was a new regulation, so we really didn't have any precedent. But as long as we were working as a team and kind of understood that, these were our goals for that week or for that month, and we needed to be here in order to make sure that the end product was a success, we just work with our staff and, just kind of communicate to them that this has to happen, the presidential election has to happen, and we have to have a success at the end. Just teamwork, that's what I can say, got me through that difficult period.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councilors wish to ask another question? I'll yield the floor back to the chairwoman of Ways and Means.
Okay, and my committee's all set? All set?
Okay. All set.
Okay, Nico, so I'm going to ask you the final question. What would make you the successful candidate for this position, or why would you be the successful candidate for this position?
Well, first, I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to interview this evening. Going back to my experience within the clerk's office, I've been there for a few years now, and kind of, they all say that the clerk's office is where, local government really starts, because that's where the residents first show up, whether it's for, they're here for sidewalk repair or resident parking, or how to navigate through city council or through different boards. It's given me the experience to kind of build on from what I learned in the city of Worcester and take it on to different cities and towns around the state. So I think the experience with that gain there really makes me confident that I'll be successful in the city of Leominster.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you. So as you heard earlier, there's going to be a subcommittee, Ways and Means, and also the committee, council as a whole, if they wish to attend on Wednesday evening at 5 o'clock. It's an open meeting. And at that point, we hope that the Ways and Means Committee can come up with a motion for Monday, May 14th for the council for consideration. And you'll be notified accordingly.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Pleasure to meet you.
I yield the floor back to the chairwoman of Ways and Means.
Thank you, Mr. President. As you indicated, we will be having a subcommittee meeting to discuss the three candidates on Wednesday evening at 5 o'clock. And at this point, I would like to ask for further time on the matter of the election of a city clerk for a term beginning July 2nd, 2018, and expiring April 15th, 2023, and I will ask you to pull my committee on that.
I'll go to the clerk and the third member.
Yes.
Council, sir, the recommendation read for further time. Are there any comments or questions on the floor? Councilor Shalfo Zephyr.
Through the chair to the Ways and Means chairperson. So the meeting on Wednesday night, is that open, or will you be in executive session?
It needs to be open.
It needs to be open. Okay, good. Thank you.
Right. That's a great question,
Yeah.
and we went back and forth on how we should do it. And the only time we would convene into executive session would be to work out some of the personnel issues around the finalist, as far as salary, things like that. Okay?
But the conversation, but the discussion about the three
All open.
candidates and the recommendation is all public.
Right.
Thank
All
you.
public,
Okay,
yes,
good.
correct,
Thank you.
good. Okay? So again, councilors heard the recommendation read for further time. Any further comments or questions? If not, all those in favor of the recommendation, please indicate in the usual manner. Those opposed? Okay, thank you. Just for a point of clarification, a comment was brought up in the public forum tonight regarding the background checks. Did you want to respond to that, or would you like me to? Totally up to you.
I don't know if we really need to respond, but the background checks were not part of the decision to bring the three candidates before us. Now that they've been interviewed, I would feel more comfortable calling references and asking the specific questions that because they've been interviewed before the entire council. So, the background checks were not used as a decision of who would be brought before the city council and who would not be brought before the city
Well,
council.
thank you for the clarification. Now, as we go forward into Wednesday night's meeting, do the references become significant?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I just wanted to point that out.
Mhm.
All right, okay. Do any councilors have any questions or comments regarding the protocol of policy? Councilor Frida?
Yeah, just to add to that, if I could,
Mhm.
I think we had, 28, 29 applicants?
31.
31.
31 applicants, and we narrowed the field over 3 days down to 7. And we interviewed 7. And these are the 3 that came out on top. These are the 3 that we're checking references on. So I think that's kind of important to point out.
I'm gonna disclose something publicly also, if I may, 1 second. Because I think it's important. When you have as many people applying for a position so significant, they come from different backgrounds. And one of the things that we made sure during the interview process was that if the question was so specific, which they were in most cases, targeting background, experience, and vision as far as being a city clerk, but you came from a different area, you could certainly apply what you have done that might be similar. So there weren't any points discarded or taken away, any rubric that was, disqualified, everything as a result of someone that came into an interview that did not have the same kind of a background that someone else might have had. So, I think that the Ways and Means did a great job narrowing down to 7, which was really a tough night to get to that point. Councilor Shalfo-Zephyr?
Yeah, thank you very much. So, references for the 3 final candidates that we interviewed tonight will be completed and available for the discussion on Wednesday?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Very good. Anything else? If not, go ahead, Councilor.
I think I just wanted to point out that the preferred qualifications for this position were a BA degree and 3 to 5 years experience in public administration, public records and office management, proven experience in managerial or supervisory role, familiarity with the VRIS voter registration info system and vital records partnership VIP systems, and ability to acquire notary public certification. So the committee took those preferred qualifications very seriously when we were looking at the applications. Of course, it wasn't an absolute in the choices that we made for the 3 that came before us, but those were the preferred qualifications, and all 3 of our final candidates had all of those qualifications. Just want to make that point.
Council?
I think another point that needs to be raised is that our city clerk is leaving June, right? Late June.
In June.
Early voter registration, which is essentially very new to every municipality in the state, starts in August. That's 30 days. So, the actual on-the-job experience factor is critical for this particular position. And that figured into it as well.
Yeah, we as far as I know, it's over a half a century. We have an historian here that can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's been over a half a century where we've had a situation like this come up. And from my experience of city government, there's always been, at one time, an assistant clerk sitting here and a clerk sitting over here. And what would happen is, as this clerk would retire, the assistant would come in. We ran into a situation this year where that transition did not happen. So we were in a situation where we were in trouble as a city. And so I want to commend the Ways and Means Committee. A lot of things have been said about, protocol and process and everything, but you did a great job, getting us to at least come to a vote hopefully on the 14th. But it hasn't been easy. And, there's discussion about whether we should deal with the clerk's position and then let that clerk weigh in on the assistant clerk. Time-wise, it didn't work out that way at all. So without bias, without question in my mind, there was no bias involved in the decision-making process. And I had a chance to sit in on the interviews, and I think you did a great job. Thank you. Okay, this meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.
The Leominster City Council meeting is brought to you by the generous support of the Service Oil Company, 345R Lancaster Street, Leominster, 978-466-1922.